Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is the third part of my elaborated sexual abuse story, and if you haven't seen my other parts I will leave it linked down in the description box below and on the cards above. But let's go ahead and get started. So in this video I'm going to be finishing off the sexual abuse story, and I'm also going to be talking about the treatments I received as a result of being sexually abused.
And trying to remain so strong, I know it's good if I'm wrong. I got it, I gotta go, running to better times.
The police came out and they took an initial statement. They came and I remember sitting at my dining room table and them, having an initial statement. They, had asked the questions, and it was really quite done quite nicely. As nice as it could have been done. They sent out a female police officer, so that was maybe a bit more comfortable. I told her everything that had happened, and she kind of asked the questions that, almost like I hadn't even thought about. She was asking questions like, and how many times a week would this happen? And I really hadn't thought about it. So I had to kind of sit there and think back to the last week and said, well, last week it happened X amount of times. And then she would write it down and she said, is that about average for what happened? And I goes, yeah, that's about average. Sometimes it'd be one less or one more, but that's about average. So she took my statement, and unfortunately I'd actually showered already after the last incident. So they wouldn't be able to get any forensic evidence, which probably was the one thing that they needed. But yeah, I wanted to get myself clean, so I had a shower. They took the initial statement, and then the next morning I had a phone call from the police and on a withheld number, so I answered it, and they said, oh, hi, is this Deanna? And I goes, yeah. And they said, oh, we've got your abuser in custody. He's been arrested and, you're safe now, sort of thing. Not by saying you're safe, but we've arrested him, he's in custody, he can't harm you. And I was like, the first thing I said was, oh, that was quick. And he said, you are expecting us to do this, aren't you? I was like, yes, but I didn't think it would be that quick. And he said, well, when it's sexual abuse concerned, we have to really act quite quickly. And I said, okay, I'm really pleased, but thanks. Thanks for letting me know. And then I told my mum what happened, and I goes, yeah, they've already arrested him. And my mum goes, well, that was quick. So I wasn't the only person that was thinking that this was really quick. So he was brought into custody, and, you can only be kept in custody for 24 hours. So after 24 hours, you then have to be released either on bail, or you have to, actually have a sentence and go to jail and stuff. So just to put a context in here, my abuser was never jailed. My abuser was never even, found typically, guilty, because they deemed it as not enough evidence. Basically, I was saying he did it, or my friends and family were saying, yeah, that, that was fishy, or he did it, and all of his friends and family were denying it. So, it was almost 50-50, and the police being the police, obviously they can't sway it one way or the other, because if there's an equal amount of evidence on both sides, you can't deem someone guilty, when there's not enough evidence to prove it. But at the time, I, was really angry at the police for not taking my side in a way, because I knew it happened. I almost felt because they were telling me that there was not enough evidence, I almost felt at the time they were saying, well, it didn't happen. And I was like, but it did happen, and I got really emotional. I really wasn't very happy. And then what I did was, it says on the letter you have a chance to appeal it. So I appealed it. I appealed the decision, and I basically said, I really, I disagree with his decision. He did do it. Please believe me, sort of thing. And the police looked into it again, and then they said that, logically there was not enough evidence. And they sent me a letter in the post to say that, the case was being closed, and that basically all his bail conditions were going to be, taken off of him, and he was going to be almost like a free man. And I had an overwhelming sign of anxiety. Just to elaborate on that, his bail conditions were things like he couldn't contact me, he couldn't come anywhere near my house, he couldn't attend the drama group when I was there, he couldn't come up and speak to me, he couldn't speak to me via somebody else, he had to just completely leave me alone. And that gave me a security blanket, that gave me a sense of safety, because if he broke those bail conditions, he was then going to get obviously worse. That'd be more evidence to show that he's more guilty, if that makes sense. I'd gone through all of this, and this process probably took about 2 or 3 years to actually come to an end. But they basically ended up closing the case with no outcome. And I hated that. I hated the fact that I had gone through all of this and for nothing to come out of it. like, you almost think, well, why did I bother telling you? Like, if nothing's going to come out of it. So the only good thing that really came out of it was the fact that he stopped talking to me and he stopped seeing me, which obviously is a big positive, but I almost wanted justice for what he'd done. Then the case was closed, not enough evidence, but if anyone else, like, you know, listening to this has been through sexual abuse, you'll know that even if you didn't get justice for what happened, you know that you feel very much like defeated in a way. Like, you feel like, well, this happened and I just wanted someone to believe me. And at the time I basically said to myself, well, no one believes me, like, you know, it obviously didn't happen. And I needed to get myself out of that mindset, because, you know, that mindset was, you know, it slowly did eat away at me, and was still really, really struggling to come into terms with the fact that, you know, I'd been through this horrific incident and I'd been abused, but I didn't feel like I was being believed. I had tried to take my own life. I had felt so bad that I just didn't want to be alive anymore. I had tried to process things myself and I couldn't do it. So the attempt was unsuccessful and I ended up in a psychiatric ward. And I stayed there for about, I think it was about sort of 2 or 3 months at the time. And during that admission, the first thing that was kind of brought up to me was, you know, I'd never heard about this before, and I was thinking, okay, why has it not been mentioned to me before in the community or something? But they mentioned a therapy called EMDR to me. And for those of you who are not in the mental health field or don't know what EMDR stands for, it stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing Therapy. And it's a therapy used very, you know, when you see those, like, those cartoons where they have, like, the little watch going back and forth in front of someone's eyes.
I'll hypnotise this gorilla.
And it hypnotises them. It's kind of like that, but it's in a therapeutic setting, so it's not used for comedy purposes. For me, I didn't have the one. You can have it where, like, they put something in front of your eyes, and it's basically, the idea of the therapy is that they want your eyes to move back and forth, like side to side, and something to do with that helps to reprogram the way that you feel about trauma in your brain. And I don't understand exactly how it works, but it worked, and I'm able now to talk about my sexual abuse story without breaking down and crying. So it really did work for me. So the way that I had the treatment done was I had 2 buzzers, and I would hold these vibrating buzzers in my hands, and they would alternate. So they would buzz, like, in, like, different places. They go buzz, 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 and that made my eyes move. And it was such a strange feeling initially, because she got me to close my eyes and I felt my eyes moving, but I couldn't control it. So it was almost like I'm having these buzzes in my hands and my eyes are moving, I can't stop it. And I was like, you know, like, it was such a weird feeling to start off with. And so in the therapy, she would get me to recount all of my traumas. So not just sexual abuse, but all of my traumas. Even the traumas that I felt were completely insignificant. She got me to recount the bullying. She got me to recount, you know, everything in relation to my childhood. And then she moved on to the sexual abuse, which was the biggest thing and the reason why I was there. So during this therapy, she also got me to think of a safe place. And this therapy was done, I think it was like the October or the November after I'd been to a Demi concert. And I absolutely had the time of my life at that Demi concert. And for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, it's Demi Lovato. And they are amazing. I absolutely look up to them as much as I can. I love their music. I love them in general. I think they're so inspirational and I would love to meet them one day, but I haven't yet. I've been to 2 concerts, and this was after the first concert I'd been to, and I'd been to the Future Now tour. I was actually on holiday and I managed to go to the Future Now tour, and I was in the right state, at the right place, right time basically, and I was able to go to the concert. I came out of that concert and I was the happiest I'd ever been. And so that was my safe place. So you know, whenever I was getting really emotional, she would say, okay, I want you to go back to your safe place. And, you know, she said, and then because she knew what my safe place was, she would say, I want you to go back to your safe place. I want you to go back to being at that Demi Lovato concert and the crowd cheering around you and her singing on stage. And she said, I want you to go back to, you know, seeing them on stage and, you know, the crowd cheering and you singing along and you taking videos of the performance and all those bits and pieces. And that would calm me down instantly, because I knew that that was a time of my life. That was the best moment I'd ever had in my life. And that was my safe place. I would go back there basically at any time just to be in that atmosphere. It was amazing. So the therapy went really well. I ended up having about 6 or 7 sessions, I think it was, in the end. And, you know, it's kind of really strange, because when I went into that therapy, I thought, no way is that going to work. But the whole idea of the therapy is that your eyes move back and forth, and by doing that, it helps your brain to reorganise the files that have been improperly filed, like the trauma files. If you've got a filing cabinet, trauma is filed incorrectly, so therefore you might have a folder sticking out here, you might have a, one that's in the wrong place, you might have one that's really, really full and that, it's breaking, it's busting at the seams. And she said moving your eyes back and forth helps your brain to sort that out and to organise those files so that the filing cabinet can shut properly. And I said that is such a great metaphor, and I still believe that's such a great metaphor to explain how it works. But after 6 sessions, I was able to talk about my sexual abuse. I was able to bring it up in conversation, and like I am doing now, and I'm talking about it, and not get emotional, which for me was such a big difference, because every time I thought about my sexual abuse before, I would have a panic attack, I would be crying, I would be absolutely hysterical. I was having daily panic attacks at this time. So going from having daily panic attacks and flashbacks and nightmares and all the different pieces, going from having those to being able to talk about it without crying or without really having really many emotions towards it was absolutely amazing, because I didn't think that would ever happen. I thought I would always be living with this trauma and always be such an emotional wreck. But having this therapy helped me to not be like that anymore, which feels amazing. So I just wanted to say here that EMDR is amazing therapy. It worked for me, but it won't work for everyone. There are other alternatives to trauma therapies. There is trauma-based CBT, there is, obviously the EMDR, there's probably other types of therapies as well. But for me, EMDR really, really worked, and I am so thankful that I had it. It was actually a student nurse at the time who convinced me to have it. At the time, she was in her first year, and she was such a sweet, lovely lady. She was amazing. She was a really therapeutic, professional individual, and she basically approached me, and because I think the staff realised that I had the best rapport with her, they asked her to do some research on EMDR and basically bring it up with me, and she talked me through it, and she said, I really highly think you should do it, but I'm not going to pressurise you into doing it, but I think it will really help you. And I'm so glad that she approached me and got me to do it. I think that it just really made me, swayed my decision even more, the fact that I had such a good rapport with her. And I did this therapy, and I'm now the lovely, bubbly person I am today because of it. And it's just amazing to feel very much like myself again. So that is the end of my sexual abuse story. Whoa, it has taken me 3 parts to actually finish the whole of the story. So I hope you have gained some knowledge and some understanding for the fact that sexual abuse isn't always as simple as some people make it out to be. People that have survived sexual abuse, they don't usually talk about the grooming process. They also don't usually talk about other things relating to the abuse. They just say, oh, I was sexually abused, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is, I hope that you've gained some information from these videos, and that it has given you some more insight into the reality of being sexually abused.
Nobody could make her feel down. She was always smiling from it to